was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rang. And if you are like me, you know, if you get a phone call in the middle of the night or really early in the morning, it's usually not good news. There was a man on the phone. He had a thick accent. I couldn't understand what he was saying. I was half asleep. But I heard the words, "your mother." And I knew, here we go, into another trauma-filled adventure with my mom. This was life with my mother. I grew up with a mom who was an alcoholic, suspected bipolar, extremely violent, and I could just go on and on. So I heard the man on the phone say, "Your mom came running into my store screaming, bloodied. She didn't want me to call an ambulance, the police. She told me to call you." I'm one of 3 children. I'm the Jan Brady. I'm the middle child. Marsha. And so I was always the one chosen because for some reason I could never say no to her. So I got in the car. I was probably about 21 at this point. I knew it was something bad. I got in the car, drove to her studio apartment in the next town, walked through the door. I could hear the moaning. And as I got closer to the bed, I looked at my mother. She had a huge gash on her forehead. She had bruises that were already going on her eyes. Her lip was split, bruises all over her body. And she proceeds to tell me a story of she was at a bar, met a man. My mother was full-blooded Portuguese. She was very old school. She didn't like phones or cars. So she never drove anywhere. She walked. Well, her studio apartment was probably about 3 blocks away from the bar. So this nice man who was buying her drink said, "You don't have to walk home. I'll give you a ride." Great. So she gets in the car, and she said his whole demeanor switched. And he went dark. And he said, "I am going to kill you. I'm going to take you up into the Los Gatos Mountains, and I'm going to hide your body, and no one will ever find you." And he starts pummeling her in the car. Now, this is in the 80s, and the cars back then didn't have power anything. They had the roll-up windows and the, handles. And she went to grab the handles to open the car door, and there was no handle there. Yeah. So she said, and this is where God comes in, she put her hand through the hole and just started digging around as he's hitting her. And by the grace of God, they came to a stoplight, and she heard a click, and the door busted open, and she fell out. And that's how she got to the 7-Eleven, and that's how the man called me. And this was life with my mother. So to humanize my parents, I would like to show a picture of my mom and my dad. If we can click that. There we go. So that is my mother back in good days. And then my dad and I was a daddy's girl. But my dad was a long-distance truck driver. And so I didn't have a relationship with my father very often until I was a teenager. Now, to go back into a little bit of, I think is really important when you're raised by parents who probably shouldn't have been parents. Both of my parents came from very abusive backgrounds. And so going back through the years when you could actually have some empathy and compassion for where they came from helps to explain a little bit of why they are the way they are. But of course, that doesn't give them an excuse to be the kind of parents that they became. Last night, I know, I think it was Gina that talked about Ephesians 6:2 that says, "Honor your mother and father." That verse is so hard for me because when you grow up with a parent that is supposed to protect and love you and they actually abuse you, that verse doesn't hold weight. Also, I don't like when you take one verse and make it the whole of your being. That verse goes on to say more, and it also talks about honoring parents that treat their children well. And there's many things in the Bible that talk about compassion and love, and it has nothing to do with abuse. And you can't just take one verse and make it that thing. So it took me a long time to come to a place of forgiveness and grace with honoring a mom that really didn't deserve that. What I didn't know at the time when all of these things, these situations with my mother kept happening, is that it was instilling a fear of authority figures in my life. We didn't trust doctors. We didn't trust hospitals. We don't trust the police. Everything in our house was hidden. On the outside, it looked great, which I'm sure in Texas, that happens a lot. It's all good on the outside. We all love Jesus, but we all know that there are many things going on in households that no one wants to talk about. And so we grow up with head knowledge. We know Jesus. We can spout off verses till the cows come home. But do we have a heart for Jesus? And also, do you know how much God loves you? We keep proving that we love God, but we don't let God enter in to really realize, even when we go through hard things, God loves us and he'll give us a way out. Now, you may not have a hard story like I do. You may not have that kind of dysfunction in your family. Your family, maybe you were taught, we've heard some of the stories. They were very legalistic things. You were just taught, like, this is how it is. This is how it's supposed to be. And you start having these truth narratives attached to you of like, well, this is how we did it as a child. So I guess this is the truth and this is what I'm supposed to live by. And so some of those things get shoved down. Like maybe there's been things that you've wanted to talk about, and it's like, we don't talk about that in our family. So you shove it down, shove it down, shove it down. But those emotions will eventually, which we heard from the last speaker, eventually those things bubble up. Because we are body, mind, and spirit. We are not one thing. So you have to remember that unless you clear out the junk that has happened from the past, you could pray all the prayers that you want, but God is asking you to come into the pit with him. He's like, please get real with your life. Please understand that your story has meaning, and I can use it for good, but only if you're willing to share it and be open about your brokenness. I grew up with a mom who prayed on rosary beads and then would read her horoscope in the morning to figure out, well, what kind of day it was going to be. That messes with your head when you're growing up. I'm like, wait a minute. God horoscope, God stars. I'm not sure. But I'm going to tell you something. I know I'm just a California girl. No one thinks California people are spiritual. God had a hold of me since I was a little girl, and I am grateful for a mom that gave me a mustard seed of faith. Because as I grew up, I had a lot of truth narratives that I had to break. My mom used her body in a lot of ways to get attention, and as much as I hated that, watching that became my narrative as I grew up. I wanted men's attention. I did drugs and alcohol because that's what I saw. And I started going down the same kind of road. I also grew up in a family that if I expressed my opinion, my voice was squashed. And it had no part to get regulated in myself to know that my voice mattered. So I was the shutdown girl. If you know anything about trauma, you're either like a rager, you're like a runner rager, or you're someone who just goes invisible. I was the invisible girl because there was a lot of violence in our family, and so I thought if you get really still, you won't get hurt. But what happens is then your voice gets lost in that too. So during that time, when I became a teenager, I thought, well, I'm just going to do the same things to numb out and I hate my life. God must hate me. He gave me this crappy family. It's just not a good thing, and so who cares? And that's how you feel when you really don't have, a strong faith to hold on to. You just think, well, he's forgotten about me. But I would always hear his voice. At a point there was just a lot of anger and resentment of having to be the mother to my mother. And that contributed to a lot of me just going out and doing these crazy things. And the one thing that I learned along the way about myself is that you can't change generational dysfunction until you change the dysfunction in you. In Psalms 91:3, it says, "Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge." And I was praying that he would save me. The journey with my mom was long and grueling at times. I had to tether between anger and love. And the only way that I could get through this was to just keep kind of asking God questions. Even though I wasn't a Christian, it was just like I was always crying out to him, like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? I don't understand. Did you forget about our family? He showed me I was chosen to create the family that I deserved and desire because he did love me. And most of all, he showed me this was going to come at a price. There would be some family members that I was going to have to say goodbye to because they were dangerous. And I think that is something you definitely have to do. Boundaries are a huge thing with me. And at the same time, I went through probably one of the hardest things in my life at 26 years old. I got married at 25 because I had been engaged and that guy broke up with me. So I was like, well, I'll show you. I'll marry someone else. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. If there's any young girls, please don't do that. The marriage was not good, and I knew about 6 months into it. And this is the thing. We choose. God didn't choose. So I found that out really quickly, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work out. I think gotta go. And I was in the process of leaving, and I found out I was pregnant. So I said, well, God must want me to stay in this marriage and work it out. And I desperately wanted to be a mother. I wanted to show the world that I could do it differently. My baby boy, Linton, was born at 9 pounds, 13 and a half ounces. Thank you. All my babies were 9 pounds. I don't know why. The doctor goes, yeah, you just have big babies. I'm like, great. So he was adorable, but 3 days in, he stopped breathing in the nursery. And thankfully, I was at the hospital because I had a C-section with him, and so that would not have been good if he had been home. The doctors came to us and said he has to have emergency heart surgery, so they rushed him to Stanford Hospital. My husband then went home because it was just too stressful for him to stay at the hospital with me. So once again, I found myself alone and being the strong one and like figuring everything out. The doctor called me and said, we tried everything we could there was usually like 5 things that can go wrong with the heart. If it's 1 or 2, they could fix it. He had all 5 things. So I was talking to God, and I thought, you are punishing me because I have lived a really bad life. As the weeks went on, at the end of 2 weeks, they came to us in the NICU, which NICU nurses are angels on earth. I'm just going to say that. They deal with the toughest cases I've ever seen in my life, and they're the most loving people I've ever seen in my life. The doctors came to us and said, your son is legally brain dead, but you have to make the choice to take him off life support. 26 years old. Been through trauma my whole life, and now here we go again. And so my then husband said, well, you've done all the hard things in your life. You have to make this decision. I can't do it. Yeah. Thanks. So I thought about it for a minute, and I said, do you have a priest on staff? And they said, yes, we do. We'll get him for you. It's like, good, because I need someone bigger than me to make this decision. I talked to a priest, and he gave me the most loving response, and he said, Phylis, your son's soul is already with God. And if he chooses to keep him alive when you take him off all the machines, that will be God's will. I was like, okay, I can do this. That was 41 years ago. So yes, I'm 67, if you want to do the math. I remember sitting at the kitchen table a few months later, and I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do now? I'm in a bad marriage. I lost my child. I thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And I was saying it out loud, what am I going to do? And I had my hands in my head, and I heard a visible voice say, start over. And then he did it again, start over. I was home alone. I got up and I ran to the front door because I thought somebody was there. And in that second, I realized, was that you? And I sat down and I wrote a letter to my then husband, and I said, don't ask me to come back. I'm leaving. I called a friend and I said, I have no job and I have nowhere to live. And she said, well, we're hiring at my job, and you can sleep on my couch for 3 months. And I started my life over listening to God's voice, and it was not a straight path up. I would love to wrap this up in a nice little bow and make you guys happy. But that's not what happened. It was a start and stop. There was things along the way. But when I tell you that the miracles started happening, where I was like, is this God guy real? Like, what's happening? 6 years later, I married I call him my first husband because we've been together for 36 years. Actually longer. We dated for 4 years. And I was pregnant with my second daughter, who is here with me today. And I was talking to a daycare lady, and I said, I think I need to go back to church. I think I'm scared. Like, I had one daughter born. She was perfect and beautiful. I have a great marriage now, but I just feel like something's missing. And also I'm scared because I'm pregnant with this third baby. Am I playing Russian roulette? Is something going to happen again? And she said, I have the perfect church for you. And I walked in with my little 3-year-old daughter, 6 months old, and I was like, I felt an electric shock go through my body. They were doing a Christmas show. Everyone was laughing. They were having fun. I was like, this is God. This is so good. And I came home and I told my husband, and he's like, that's great for you, honey. I'm not ready for that yet. And I was like, are you kidding me? What is happening? That is your faith walk, guys. It's not a straight line up. You got to work for it. I tell people, I laugh when people go, Yeah, Christianity. It's just a book. Oh, yeah, it's a crutch. I'm like, it's the hardest thing you'll ever walk in your life. There's so many challenges, and you have to dig in harder. So I went to church for 3.5 years without my husband. And then one day when I was I used to sell Pampered Chef. And I was at a conference in Chicago, and I called in to check on the girls. They were like, Mom, guess what we did today? And I was like, what? And it was Sunday. I didn't even think about it. And they're like, Dad took us to church. And I was like, what? So that's how God works. My mom came back in my life when my first daughter was born. She broke her first hip, and I took care of my mom begrudgingly for 16 years. It was hard, you guys. One day, she was particularly mean to me, and I got in the car, and I said, Lord, why don't you just take her? I'm done with her. Like, I'm bawling in the car. I'm like, just take her. I can't stand that woman anymore. And I heard the words, patience and grace, patience and grace. And I was like, I have none of that. Take her now. And little did I know, years later, when my older daughter was walking down the aisle with her daddy, God dropped those 2 words into my head, and I started bawling. Because the patience and grace wasn't for that day. He said, I have so much more for you. Just be patient. Be graceful. I know your mom is hard. And she never admitted to the things that she did. But the night before she died, I stroked her silver hair and I said, you can go now. I forgive you. And I have a really good life. So it's okay. And she passed the next morning. The trauma that your body goes through when you have a really, really hard story is very important that you don't minimize it. I know people want to get you to the holy. They just want to quote scripture and they want to make you feel better because it's uncomfortable to sit with somebody who's grieving and uncomfortable. The best thing you can do, and I've heard some of this from the speakers, is to just sit with these people. Thank you for sharing your story. Tell me more. I'm here for you. And God does love you. Sitting and understanding, not minimizing, is something very, very important. One is recognizing the feelings that you're feeling and start the process to begin healing. I want to show a picture of my family now. There's those grandbabies. Oh. My youngest just got married last May. We're waiting for more grandbabies. I'm just putting that out there. In 2023, I became a certified trauma-informed, spirit-filled, God-ordained coach with Freedom Movement. I love to help women walk through the mother-daughter wound, but I also just help with any kind of family, generational dysfunction that's happening to clear the pathways. It does affect your brain, but you can actually shift the neural pathways in your brain to switch the bad thinking that you've had from the past. I kind of geeked out on that when I started learning it. I'm like, what? That is amazing. But it's hard work. So, one is recognizing the feelings, starting the process for healing. 2, you need to name that thing that you're stuck in. Is it abandonment, neglect, being ignored, being silenced? Figure out what it is and name it, journal it out. 3 is don't minimize those emotions. We sometimes say things like, well, so-and-so has it so much worse, I'm fine. Or, it's not that bad. That's not okay to do. Claim it, name it, get rid of it, and then we can get back to work with where God wants you to be. Ask for help. You guys, I have 80-year-old women coming up to me telling me stories that they are like, I have never told anyone this in 80 years. And my response is, thank you for sharing that with me. It means so much to me. And your story matters. That right there will touch hearts and entrust people, more and more people to you than anything else. So my prayer for you today is just take something from this and get rid of any fear or shame that's holding you back. And know that wherever your heart holds, that's where your story is, and God really wants to use that. You can be free to become the woman that He truly wants you to be if you get honest with your life and ask Him, where do you want me to go with this? What do you want me to do with this? Because He will make your mess your message. The first verse I memorized as a Christian was, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will make your path straight. Now, He will make your path straight. It's His path. It may be a little crooked on your end. You're like, wait, I want to go this way. He's like, no, you need to go over here. So that's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. He has done a work in me, and it has come at a lot of big prices, but it's been worth every single second. And so my prayer for you guys is to live that authentic, beautiful life and watch God lead you. And if you haven't heard my whole story on Unmothered, I do have books in the back, and I actually have Patience and Grace hats, and I would love to see you guys in them. Thank you.